News 24/7.
It's like a horror movie where the monster refuses to die. Efforts in the lower house to revise the Constitution are moving again. Former Speaker Jose De Venecia says the president's son, Mikey Arroyo, and Administration Representative Martin Romualdez offered to give him back the speaker's position if he expressed support for charter change. While Congressman Arroyo denied this, he did say that there were already 177 lawmakers in favor of a resolution authored by Speaker Prospero Nograles, which seeks to convene Congress into a constituent assembly to amend the charter. Many fear this measure would be used to extend President Arroyo's term. Malacanang continues to insist that the president will not be in office beyond 2010. Proof of this, it says, is the approval of the 11.3 billion peso budget for poll automation and other preparations being done for next year's election. Still, many people remain wary. Join me as we discuss this issue again tonight on The Big Picture. Campi Representative Elpidio Barzaga says opponents of charter change are preventing an honest-to-goodness review of the 1987 Constitution. He says the 87 Charter contains economic provisions that are obsolete in today's globalized world. Barzaga says Speaker Prospero Nograles' proposal to lift restrictive economic provisions will make the country more attractive to foreign investors.
All the meetings and all the trying, then we will have to chart another course of action for that.
There we are. Joining me in the studio, Cavite Representative Elpidio Barzaga, Vice Chairman of the Committee on Constitutional Amendments. Sir, good evening. Nice to see you.
Good evening also, Ricky.
Sir, it's being talked about again. Every time it's talked about, there's protest, then it dies, and then it gets revived again. Now 177 have signed the resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the information which I received.
You are in favor of it, right?
Yes, of course. Because personally, I think that it is about time to change some provisions of the Constitution. The Constitution became effective as early as 1987, and for a period of 22 years, there has been no single item in the Constitution which has been the subject of change.
And you're on record as saying you want to revisit the economic provisions.
Yes.
To allow more foreign investment.
Definitely.
Are there other things that you want to examine? Kayo mismo, sir.
Well, of course, there are so many congressmen who are advocating, for example, the change in the government. As a matter of fact, there has been proposals to amend the Constitution from presidential to parliamentary form of government. And that is also worth looking into.
So you think that you'd be willing to look into that?
Yes, of course. Because many are advocating or wishing for economic reforms. But we have to consider that there can never be effective economic reforms until and unless there are also political reforms.
One of the things that I think has always been contentious, regardless of who's the president, is the extension of term limits. Ang nakikita ng mga tao, and I don't know if you agree with this, but they find some people think it's self-serving, some people think it will extend the terms not just of the congressmen or the senators, but also of the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, of course, that has always been the adverse comment. That people are always under the impression that whenever there is a charter change, it would benefit or extend the term of the sitting president. And we are asking them, will this be not also the same argument, assuming that there will be a new president after 2010?
Exactly, sir. So, kahit sino man ang nakaupo doon,
totoo yun.
Parang ang tingin ng tao, ayaw nila na mag-extend ng term, kahit sino.
Well, that's the trouble. We are still living under the shadow of martial law. In 1996, President Ramos was very popular.
Yeah.
But in spite of his popularity, in spite of the economic recovery of the Philippines at the time, people are against charter change.
Yes.
On the ground that President Ramos might use charter change as a vehicle for the extension of his term.
But today we know that that's true, that he did want to extend his term.
Who?
President Ramos. We know that to be true today.
Well, I doubt it.
But they are on record as saying they wanted to do that. kasi hindi daw natapos yung mga kailangan nilang gawin, so gusto nilang i-extend yung term ni Pangulong Ramos. And I think, sir, that's part of the reason why people are suspicious. Because as you said, it was being suspected of being used, and apparently it was. And kahit na medyo popular si FBR at the time, hindi pa rin umubra itong charter change.
Well, the congressmen, the 177 congressmen, actually know this apprehension. And because of this apprehension, in the resolution which we signed, we impose as our own limitations, as our own conditions, that in the event that Congress would convene as a constituent assembly, there are certain conditions to be satisfied. Number one, the elections in 2010 will push through. Number two, there will be no extension or reduction of the term of office of any public official elected right now.
And yet, despite all the public suspicion, the House continues to insist on trying to do it. Why?
Well, because the House feels that there is really a need to change the Constitution. As a matter of fact, the survey shows that there is really a need. The belief of the people is that there is a need to change the Constitution. The only thing they are saying is this is not the proper time. So we are asking, when would be the proper time?
And that's a good question. And apparently the public doesn't seem to think at this point any time has been the proper time. So
Yes.
again, so if that's the case, why then insist?
On changing the Constitution?
Yes, sir.
Because as legislators, we feel, and it is our belief, that there is really an urgent need to revisit some of the provisions of the Constitution. An example would be the restrictive economic provisions, which were implanted in our Constitution as early as 1935,
Such as what, sir?
such as the 60-40 requirement
On foreign ownership.
on foreign ownership.
But do you realize that power generation allows 100% foreign ownership, that mining allows effectively 100% foreign ownership? We're not seeing investments in those areas, which
Yes.
would suggest that it's not the restrictive limitations that's keeping investments from coming in, it's other things.
No, I don't agree to that, because I was a municipal mayor for a period of 9 years. We have several economic zones in the province of Cavite, and that has been the complaint, one of the complaints of our investors.
In the economic
They
zone.
have settled in the Philippines, their business is good. Unfortunately, they cannot acquire the land on the building, the land where their buildings are situated.
Why then are we not seeing the kind of foreign investments in power that will allow us to offset power shortage?
Well, perhaps there are other reasons.
Yun nga po yung sinasabi ko. It's not the restriction on
Well,
economic ownership.
perhaps
it's other
insofar as
restriction.
that form of particular kind of business is concerned,
Maybe iba.
maybe there might be other reasons.
Let's go into other things now, sir, because the Senate has said hindi sila papayag. We know the scenario. If you get a supermajority, 3/4 of both houses, some of your members are inclined to try to go ahead without the Senate. It could end up in the Supreme Court. Everybody kind of knows that.
In order that we could have a clear picture, let's start with the provisions of the Constitution. Under Article 17, it is expressly provided that any amendment to or revision of this Constitution may be proposed. Number one, Congress upon 3/4 vote of all its members. Well, the difficulty lies insofar as interpretation of that phrase upon 3/4 of all the members of the House.
Yeah.
Let us assume that right now there are 240 members of the House. 3/4 of that would constitute 180 members.
Yeah.
And in the Senate, we have 24 members. 3/4 of that would constitute 18.
Yeah.
Insofar as the interpretation of 3/4 is concerned, it might be voting jointly or voting separately.
Yeah.
What would be the significance? If we interpret 3/4 votes as voting separately, it simply means that for any proposal to amend the Constitution, this must be present. Number one, at least 18 votes coming from the Senate.
But-
And number two, 180 votes coming from the House, or a total of 198.
Right.
On the other hand, if we interpret the phrase voting separately, meaning if we interpret the phrase 3/4 of all the members of the House